that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because you have this insane work ethic, man. Like in terms of musical output, and you have done over the years, working in different projects, of course, Chain Gang into what is now Heavenward. Do you know what downtime is, Cam? Because it strikes me that you just keep
Yeah.
going.
I think I have no choice but to just kind of keep going. And I think it's been interesting just because, you know, I obviously love music. I obviously love making music, creating it, doing, beginning the process of conceiving an idea and then everything that comes in between until you get to that release day, and then everything that follows after. It's fun, it's exciting. I was talking to a friend about this recently. It's kind of like a drug. You're kind of hooked to it. But believe it or not, I do find a lot of downtime, which is good. I think I'm just at a point now in my life where I'm fairly comfortable, I think, with myself and my process. And I one of the whole reasons why this Heavenward project started was because I missed making music that was just strictly for fun. There was no other intention. It was like, let's make some good music, maybe play some shows, put out records, and I just, let's just do it that way. Keep it simple, keep it authentic. And I think it's been successful as far as
Yeah.
that mission goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I will ask, what does downtime look like for you? Do you have to like take yourself away from the studio? Do you go out for walks? Are you able to relax, in close proximity to the studio? How do you take your downtime? What does that look like?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And and it's funny. It's a preconceived notion about me, and obviously it's there, and I understand why it's there. But I don't really do any recording at all on my own. Like I have maybe a couple pieces of gear at my house. Like I'm not a gear guy. I don't produce music. I don't make music. As far as like being on my own, like
Yeah.
anytime I go to make music, it's kind of like my mind, my heart, my soul has reached a point where it's like, okay, there's something to do, something to say. And I'm very blessed and very lucky, but I usually have, um, you know, a list of friends slash collaborators who I can call and be like, hey, man, you want to jam today? Like, I got this changing idea. Cool, let's work on something. Or, at least for the Heavenward record was different just because, I'm kind of steering the ship on this one. So I would sit in my room when I felt inspired with the guitar, write out some, really simple demos, voice memo the ideas, build structures on my own, and then from there go to the studio and build everything out. So like it's an interesting process, and I think a much simpler process than people may think. But going back to your question about my downtime, what I like to wake up and I like to go surf.
Nice.
I live in Santa Monica, California, so I really love getting in the ocean,
Yeah.
surfing every day as long as there's swell, which is just one of the greatest things there is for my mind, body, and soul. And I think in general, like I get a lot of anxiety if I sit still.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I like to kind of keep moving up until like 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Then I'm like, cool, my day's done, my work day's done. Like I've finished up all these jobs. I'm good. Like time to chill out. And then I don't feel bad or guilty or anxious about just like sitting my ass on the couch.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, it's good, and it's nice to know that you can do that. And has that always been the way? Because one of my questions to you is going to be, how you've progressed and developed as a person. And I wonder, you know, have you always been able to switch off? Since the beginning. Say you're looking, way back, with stuff with Chain Gang, to where you are now with Paraphonics and Heavenward. How have you changed and developed? Have you been able to always say switch off at 5 p.m. or have you, you mentioned the drug there earlier on, or
Mhm.
have you sometimes seen music like a drug and addiction that you just can't stop?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm 37 years old and I'm still doing this. You know what I mean? Chain Gang of 1974 has been in existence since 2006. And it's still going. Granted, it now operates in a much different manner, but it still operates. And then, I've always been one to kind of trust my gut and trust my instinct, which led me to, moving in the direction of starting the band Teenage Wrist back in
Yes.
2015 with, with Marshall and Anthony. And that was all basically just due to personal necessity and coming out of a very bad album cycle with Chain Gang and feeling the need and desire to kind of just do something that was for fun, do something that needed, that I should say, didn't really need much around it in order for it to operate. It was just a few friends who wanted to play some music and play some shows and just keep it as simple and fun as possible. But I think just like everything that does start to see success, it starts to operate as a business, which teenagers ended up doing. And I left for my reasons, and I'm so happy for the guys. I'm so happy like how
Yeah.
well they're doing right now. It's awesome. Love those guys with all my heart. But just out of necessity, I had to walk away from that. But I bring this up because even after walking away and having a very difficult time with that band and during those years, I still felt the need to fulfill this space that was now empty. And I was just like, okay, like I primarily listen to rock music. I primarily listen to guitar driven music is what inspires me, because people are usually swayed into a different direction if they're introduced to me as Chain Gang in 1974, just because
Yeah.
it's so in indie pop electronic. But that's also my way of, acknowledging my love for the 80s new romantic music and all this kind of stuff. But I digress. So, but primarily it's this love I have for just emotional, romantic, borderline theatrical, just like rock music that's not afraid to kind of be pop focused, not afraid to focus on melodies. And I just need to do that in a way. So I think I just was able to turn that switch back on and have this vision of what I thought for Heavenward, but kind of bringing it back down to the basics of understanding what works for me, what I enjoy about it, what I don't enjoy about it, and like let me now categorize everything and really just put my head down and keep moving forward with this goal in mind. And that was just to make music at my convenience and make music when I felt inspired, because that was going to, I think, give me the best results.
Yeah.
So, but even, going into that, it's funny because like I wasn't, this kind of goes back to your question of like, how am I able to turn on and off? But like, I was in an album mode, I didn't feel like making an album. I just wasn't something I wanted to do, but a few friends continued to bring it up. Like, hey, you should maybe make a record with this. My wife brought it up a few times. She's like, hey, you should maybe like do something with it. People are obviously listening to the project. They obviously care about what you're making. You should do it. You should do it. So Zach Tush, who produced the album, and he produced the previous EP for Heavenward, when we were talking towards the end of 2022, and he basically kind of convinced me in a way. He's like, dude, we should just make the album. Like, we should do it. And I was like, we started the conversation, and we finally were like, okay. So it was funny because I basically paid him the deposit to make the album, because he jumped on as producer. He mixed, produced, engineered everything. So
Wow.
yeah, he's a monster. But it was funny because I paid this deposit, and he was basically like, cool, you got like 3 months to write an album, go for it. And I'm like, oh shit, like I don't know what I'm going to do here. But I think instinctually I just was able to turn that switch on, and it just was like this very easy it was just very easy, effortless moment that just kind of happened, and everything just kind of came out all at once. And then it was pretty cool. So, but now that I'm done with that, that switches off. Like, I don't want to touch a guitar and write any songs like for the next year. That's how I feel right now. So it's very back and forth.
Yeah, I guess it's whatever mood takes you, and that that I will come back to in a minute, because I would like to talk about the kind of the different sort of hats that you put on musically. But you used a word just then called, well, you used the word success, Cam, and I wonder, what does success mean to you, given that you've experienced great success in terms of streaming figures? You've also experienced the business end of it. You mentioned obviously with Teenage Wrist there. How has your definition of success changed since you started in the early, in the mid 2000s to where you are now? Has the way you define success changed at all?
It's funny. It's funny you bring that up, because I was literally just talking to my wife about this. I think it's the human mind is an interesting thing. It it plays a lot of tricks on you.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll be 38 years old in 2 months. So meaning in about, let's say, 14 and a half months, I'll be, no, hold on. I'm doing my math way wrong.
I'm terrible at
26,
maths.
20, 20, 26 and 26 months, something like that. Let's just say 25 months just to keep it easy. I'll be
Around that.
40 years,
Yeah.
I'll be 40. Um, and I think that's a big like life moment. Like when you turn 40, it's like you start to kind of become very introspective and start to kind of look back at the memories. You're like looking now at this catalog, this list of what you've done in your life. Um,
Yeah.
and I can look at the list that I had when I was, 13 years old, and that list had 5 things on it that I thought would never ever be accomplished. Um, and it turns out, 7 years after I wrote that list, all that shit was crossed off. And then there was a second list, then the third list, and the fourth list, and all the new lists continued because everything kept getting crossed off. And I think, especially in this industry, you're forced to look at numbers, you're forced to
Yes.
look at data.
Yeah.
Um, I think all of that results into mental health issues. I think all that results into um, comparing yourself to others when you shouldn't have to, and um, doing your best not to fall into those traps of anxiety and this and that. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing something, you do want to be successful at it. You do want it to come off as an accomplishment, but I think for me, it's human nature, and it's a fucked up side of human nature where I can look back and see all these things that I've accomplished that thousands of people would kill to
Yeah.
have just one of those things on my list. And then I'm constantly just looking for something more. I'm like, okay, well, no. Like, oh, well, last month Chain Gang's monthly listeners were 538,000 plus. Now it's 534,000. Fuck, is it over? Is it ending? What, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So, and like the same thing is happening with Heavenward. Like the 2 singles came out, I was at 40,000 monthlies, and then it's now at 31. And I'm like, oh, do people just not care? Is it not good? It takes training, I think, every single day to kind of wake up and be extremely grateful for what you do have,
Mm.
and take the time to truly cherish and admire those little things you have and those little wins that you do have. That's something
Mm.
that I bring up a lot. It's like, I don't think it's an arrogant move or a conceited move to celebrate every little win,
Mm.
and each individual can define that little win, but I think it's important to do so, just because it is a reminder to yourself to say, hey, I'm doing something that is making me happy, and I'm seeing some sort of result, some positive result here. So, to really answer your question, I still don't really know what equates to success, just because on paper I've had things that should make anyone feel like they fucking made it. But
Yeah.
then there's a lot behind the curtains that have to do, I think, just with the human mind, and I think how we're programmed, that possibly throw up some smoke and mirrors and make you see something else.
Yeah.
But it's a daily practice. I think it's just a daily practice of reminding yourself that, like, I have these 5 things that I'm extremely satisfied with in my life, and I don't want to take them for granted. I'm going to cherish them, and the goal is to just continue to build off of that. So
Mm.
whether that being streaming numbers, whether that the fact that people bought and almost sold out the entire first pressing of the Heavenward record before the album's even out, like, these little things I've got to
Awesome.
be like, I'm like, man, like, Kamtin, that's fucking great. Like, who are you? Like, who are you in this large, massive sea of the music industry? You're the tiniest little fucking fish swimming around, So the fact that, like, you're able to survive and, like, still have these little wins, like, take that into consideration and cherish it, and don't take it for granted, because the moment you do, all the bigger things will be stripped away from you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Cam, and I appreciate your reflection on that because my next question was going to be another bit of word association around legacy, and it sounds to me that you are content with the quality and the impact of your output. Obviously legacy can mean different things to different people as well, but like what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you are happy and proud of what you've put out and what you will continue to put out, obviously with this record coming with Pyrophonics coming out soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I'm very proud of it. And I think I'm able to I've been able to learn um to not let anything out in the universe until I am proud of it. And I'm fortunate where it's not a long process for me, just because I think I'm very sure of what it is that I want and what I need as far as the creative output goes. But no, I'm definitely proud, and that does go back to the whole statement of like making sure you don't take shit for granted. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Anything that had to do with Chain Gang or Teenage Risk and now Heavenward, like I have to I have to like categorize all those moments and be like, that's a moment, this is a moment, now this is the current moment, like just take time to look back and reflect on all that kind of stuff. But no, man, I'm very, very proud of this record. I think the people who have heard it and who know me on a personal level have told me that this is the most like Cam album they've ever heard in their entire lives, which is very, very cool for me, to hear, because I do think that, without sounding like cheesy and like very cliche, but I think it is it's a very personal album and it's a very authentic record. I think it just there are no smoke and mirrors on this one. It's just like these are rock songs that I think are good and I'm proud of, and I hope you kind of enjoy the world that I've built out for you here and pay attention to all of it. And yeah, I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited for people to kind of hear what I've done, and obviously hear what I've done with my friends, giving credit to Marshall Gallagher of Teenage Risk, to help co-write the record and perform on it. Zach, who produced the record. My friend Austin Heyman, who is in a great band, Dear Boy, out of Los Angeles, who co-wrote half the record, performed on it. My buddy Mike Robinson, who's a great drummer, plays in a lot of bands. He played drums. So like there are a lot of it's and that's also an aspect that I'm also very proud of as well, because though it's quote unquote a solo project, I think learning to and I've talked about this before in like a podcast I did kind of recently, but learning to let go of your ego, I think is a very big deal, because that can stunt your growth. It can build up walls. And I think you obviously have to have an ego to have drive and, strive to have success. But when the ego gets in the way of, I think, learning and growing and creating something that could be far more beautiful than it would have been if you hadn't been able to kind of see that realization of the personal ego, then it becomes very, very fruitful. So being
Yeah.
able to bring these song ideas to these great friends and collaborators and be like, hey, I wrote this song front to back. Here are the melodies, here are the lyrics. I need some guitar. What do you got? And then we just sit in the room and play. So like that's a big aspect, and I'm also very proud of as well, because it was just a pure collaboration and ended up with a really great result.
Yeah. I'm really excited about it. I have three or four more questions now, Cam, before we finish, because
Yeah, buddy.
I'm particularly interested. Certainly, as a listener, when I listen to your back catalogue, through everything, but particularly with Heavenward, to me, it seems like there's an element of catharsis in your work where there's obviously self-discovery elements. You're talking about different things. Obviously, obviously as a listener, I have a certain perception of things, but for you, and it would only be right for me to ask you directly, is Heavenward catharsis for you in terms of getting some stuff out that you perhaps wouldn't be able to do in other forms and in other guises, as it were?
No, man, absolutely. And I think honestly, that's one of the main reasons why I'm still making music.
Mm,
Because obviously I have my dark moments, I have my dark thoughts,
yeah.
and I think everyone does, but um, I'm a fairly happy and positive person. I think
Yeah.
I'm able to look outside the window and just look at everything and really just enjoy the universe and enjoy what the universe has given me. But there's obviously, going back, there are dark moments, there are dark thoughts. I'm a human being. I think we all have them, and being able to write about it, being able to put it into a melodic form and into a musical form is definitely my only form of therapy, really. Because if I'm dealing with something, because obviously, if you're listening, like, I don't really write happy songs. I've never I've never really written happy songs. And even if people think I've written a love song and it sounds like a love song, it's most likely not a love song. But that's what my heroes did. That's what my musical heroes did. It's like they wrote these songs that came off melancholy. They wrote these songs that did touch on darker shit in life. And I've never been drawn to positive music. I've been drawn to music that can uplift me, but it's also like, for the most part, I do enjoy music that is like this true demonstration and representation of just like the darkness of humanity and like human feelings, and being able to hear an artist's cry for help in a way throughout this song. So like, that's what I grew up on. That's what I listen to now. And it's like, I don't think I really know any other way, to be honest with you. But I'm at a point where I'm able to kind of talk about something that I've been going through in my music. And then when that's the first step. I've like acknowledged the problem. I've acknowledged whatever this issue is, and I'm able to write about it. And in that process of writing lyrics, there are, milestones and wins, because I'm trying to figure out the lyrics, trying to figure out the rhyme, trying to figure out the flow, everything, the melody. And then through that, I'm discovering new words and discovering, oh, no, that's actually how I felt. Oh, okay. And then that's one step, and that's another accomplishment. And then once you start laying down the vocals and recording them, you're repeating these words to yourself over and over, and you start to feel it more and you start to acknowledge it more. And even these vague sentences that may have just been put down to essentially sound cool and be somewhat poetic now start taking up your own personal meaning, just like a listener would have with them as well. So it's this very beautiful and cool cycle that essentially ends up becoming this this reality and acknowledgement of this issue that I've been facing. And then now that the song is recorded, the music's out, if I ever want to go back and listen to it, I can now look back at that as somewhat like a timestamp in history and be like, oh yeah, that's when I was dealing with this issue. And I was able to kind of like recognize that. And now I can take that work into real life and like start moving forward and push forward to hopefully, creating some sort of progress in whatever this issue is. So it's interesting that music can do that. But again, I owe it to my heroes. It's like, especially with the Pyrophonics album, the influence is just like, it's from, bands like Failure, basically anything Ken Andrews has done. It's like Year of the Rabbit, the On Project, bands like, man, just unbelievable shit. Bands like Hum, My Vitriol, Catharsis, Swerve Driver, Placebo, just a lot of these bands that have this dark essence to them, which I'm just always so drawn to. Like, Greg Dooley of Afghan Wigs, Twilight Singers, all that shit. So yeah.
It's wonderful to hear you mention a band like My Vitriol. Got to see them a few months ago, and they're just so underrated, man. So underrated.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, they opened for a band called 100 Reasons. And they, they were opening, and people forget the legacy of a band like My Vitriol and some of those other bands that you mentioned there. Failure, one of my favorite bands, but criminally underrated.
Absolutely.
But this isn't about me, Cam, and I want to.
No, but see, now I'm excited because I like talking about all this kind of shit.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's something in what I just heard there was that you create a world, because I was thinking to myself, hang on a second, how does Cam come in from a surf? Coming from a surf where he's had a good time and he's chilled and write this, this dark, heavy music. How do you put yourself in that place? But what I just heard, and you mentioned it a little bit there, was you creating a world. You're creating a world for yourself almost. So you can write these songs in this world that you kind of create. Is that is that accurate? If have I misinterpreted that? Because
No. It's you're correct. But also it does confuse me at times too, because like hearing you say that kind of makes me think like, oh yeah, how do I do that? And why
yeah,
do I do that? And is that
yeah,
healthy?
yeah,
So now I'm having this, because it is funny because like, my in-laws, my wife's parents are so incredible and supportive and like really enjoy the arts and are always so excited whenever I release new music. But they know me as kind of like this, pretty positive, happy-go-lucky dude. And then, they're listening to like the new Heavenward music, they're listening to Gasoline, and essentially that song is about, fetishizing gasoline and burning myself on fire, so it's like, where's the connection there? So sometimes there are these moments where I'm like, fuck, am I too vulnerable? Like, because I do see myself as just like a normal guy. I want to be a normal. I just want to be like a pedestrian, a civilian. I've always wanted that. I've never. I
mm,
think maybe when I was younger, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be famous. But
right,
I've learned that like I hate attention. I hate
right,
being, obviously moments like this, I'm flattered and it's fun to talk about like this. That this kind of stuff is cool. But like if I'm in front of the camera, if I'm in public and people, sometimes I'm just like, why me? Like what's going on here? So it is kind of like a battle here and
mm,
there. And I think a battle that kind of never really ends. But um, yeah, I don't know. So it's like,
yeah,
I think it's just me doing what I know. I'm not sure there's like a real answer to it. I think it's
that's
just
okay.
kind of like I've kind of the way I've always been. I've been able to kind of be in touch with, I think, my feelings, even though how emo and sappy that sounds. But I've always I've always been able to kind of like know how I feel in a situation, know how I feel regarding anything, and like know I've 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 always been pretty confident in myself, I think. And like
yeah,
obviously I have my insecurities, but like knowing who I am as a person, knowing my interest, what I like, how I want to dress, what I want to eat, what I like to listen to, all these things, like I've always been pretty confident when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think like that's maybe where and how I'm able to kind of like live my life is essentially as like a pedestrian, because yeah, I make music and everything, but I also like I work I do like creative direction, branding, and like graphic design for a lot of bands as well. So it's
yeah,
still in the music industry, but like that's kind of like how I spend most of my days, just like,
yeah,
in front of a computer doing that kind of stuff. So like, it's funny because I'll do this a whole album cycle layout kind of thing for a band, and then like we turn in. I'm like, hey guys, like thanks so much for trusting me. Like this is awesome. Like so stoked we have to do this. And then they'll be like, oh, and by the way, like we just want to tell you like your work with Teenage Wrist inspired this album. Blah blah. Blah. I'm like, wait, what?
awesome,
I'm like,
awesome.
I didn't think you realized I even made music. Like, what the hell's going? So I'm that now ties into the whole on off thing too, because I'm just like maybe spread myself too thin where I just don't even have an idea. Maybe this is the moment I'm realizing I don't even have an identity. I don't even know who I
Oh
am.
man, it's fascinating to hear you go through that process, and obviously I'm conscious that I was only given 30 minutes with you. I do have one more.
No, it's okay.
Are you
We're
sure?
in, we're in no rush right now.
Oh,
Don't
cool.
don't worry.
Oh, that's great. I've only got two or three more, but in
Yeah,
terms
no
of,
problem, man.
I just want to obviously just reflect on that. Just hearing you talk about that, I think in terms of your identity, maybe it's finding maybe people talk about self-actualization, right? Where you're striving to get to that point, but it's like a journey, right? So maybe maybe you haven't figured it out yet, but you're on the way to doing it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
absolutely. Yeah.
and maybe Heavenward is part of that, and maybe Teenage Wrist was a part of that before. Maybe Chain Gang was stage one, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course. No, I mean, but that also goes into just like that whole, simple theory of like everything happens for a reason, you
Yeah,
know. No, I've said this so many times in interviews, but like I've always believed in progression, and it's
yeah,
like if you're not progressing, like then you may have to kind of press pause and like start to like take yourself outside of the box and look in and be like, okay, like what's happening here? Like, is this worth doing? Is this worth pursuing? Because if I'm not growing from this, then like what's really the point?
yeah,
So no, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think this whole life is a journey. I think it's this whole the every single day. it's so kind of generic and cliche, but like you have no idea when this is going to end. So it's kind of like I've always had that viewpoint in my life, and like which has led me to making certain decisions in my life, which it's funny because this kind of goes back to the human mind. It's like I've always thought like I never know when this is going to end. Like how
Yes.
I don't know when I'm going to die. I don't know how old I'm going to be. Like I don't know what's going on. So I may as well know what I love and pursue it and like make a life out of that. But then there's like but then you have those like internal battles of like, well, like I dropped out of college to make myself happy and pursue these things, and I've had a good life since then. But what if I didn't do that? What if I went this route? And like, would my life be even better, or would it be worse? So then there's a lot of the stuff that like you kind of life is just funny because you'll make these decisions that you're so confident with, but then there's always the what if.
Yeah,
And
man.
I think it's important to kind of like not ignore the what if, but like I guess what's the right way of explaining this? You know,
I understand. Yeah, I think I get
yeah,
it. Yeah, it's like
yeah,
yeah, the what if is there, and you could have stayed on that route, done the college thing or whatever. But then maybe none of it. Maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
yeah,
So
exactly.
there's a lot of there's a lot of things there, and I just wanted to sort of, because I know that you heard in your tone of voice where you were like, oh, maybe I'm spreading myself too thin, and maybe I don't know what my identity is. Like I can hear what you're saying, but equally, you don't, if you don't have your idea, if you don't have that figured out yet, that's okay. But equally, try not to beat yourself up too much, because it feels like it sounds like to me that you've created, like I said earlier, you've created a body of work that not only connects with you and you're like, okay, I'm proud of this stuff, but obviously connects with lots of other people. So I think there's something to be very, um content is the wrong word, but definitely proud of, you know what I mean?
Well, thank you, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate. That's very kind of you to say. No,
yeah,
for sure. I think we're all. I think at the end of the day, like we're all on the same journey. You know what I mean?
yeah,
We're all discovering new things about ourselves every single day, and it's just like that's it, man. That's part of the blueprint, and I
yeah,
don't think there's any other way around it. So I think it just comes down to basically just recognizing that, and
yeah.
then finding the fulfillment and the contention within your life, and like, but all the while still making sure you are moving forward in a healthy way, progressing in a healthy way, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, 100%, 100%, and I'm totally on the same level with you there. Before we do the promo questions, where I'm going to ask you, about message to UK fans, because that's where we are. I have a
Oh
challenge.
yeah.
I have a challenge for you, Cam, because I'd like you to take me into your process. There's so many songs on this record that I love, and I'm content, and I'm confident that other people will love. Fans of rock music, in all of its glory. My Vitriol fans are going to dig this, Silverchair fans are going to dig this, Failure fans are going to dig
Yeah.
this, etc. But
Oh yeah.
but I wanted to go deep on a particular track that called "Be My Blues," which is on there. And obviously, again, so many tracks connected, with me, and have connected with me in the past. But this one, I'd like you to take me into the world you created for this. What were you thinking about? If you're comfortable enough to tell me, where were you? What were you thinking about when you wrote that track from this new record, Paraphonics?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm glad you pinpointed that song. It's a cool song, and it's going to be the next single. Actually comes out on Wednesday
Ah,
because
nice, good timing.
yeah. So I'm stoked about that. But it's actually funny. I originally wrote that song back in 2016, end of 16 or 17, for it to be on the debut Teenage Wrist album.
Mhm.
So we were writing the Teenage Wrist record, and Marshall and I were primarily the main songwriters in the band. So a lot of times we would just write together in the room, or sometimes we would be at home separately and like write songs and bring them to each other. But you mentioned Silverchair. I'm a massive fan of the band. Have been since I was a kid, and like
Yeah.
Neon Ballroom is one of my favorite records of all time. It's
Mine too,
just
dude. Mine too.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just this cool pseudo alt grunge goth album. I don't know, man. It's just so fucking rad. But I, was just listening to a lot of Silverchair at the time, specifically that record, and was
Mm.
was listening was listening to that album, and was just like, man, like it'd be so cool to have a song like Anna's Fire, something like that. So I started writing this song like acoustically that would then, kind of turned into this very like Silverchair kind of vibe, like anthem for the year 2000 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it was this thing, it existed. It ended up not making the album. So we realized like, hey, we kind of wrote this record. This song doesn't really fit like we thought it did. Like, let's just not put it on there. So years went by, and I think it was back in 2019 or something like that. And I maybe even 2020, I can't remember. But the band Vane, who one of my favorite hardcore bands. I really love that band and how fucking they're just very cool and do very, very cool experimental stuff.
Really heavy stuff, man. Really heavy stuff.
Yeah. But they during the pandemic they released kind of like a remix, rearranged like old Data New Machine.
Beautiful.
And they had the 20 seconds, 20 hours song, and I was just like, oh man,
love that. Yeah.
This is incredible. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of what Deftones did when on their they have the kind of like B-sides compilations album kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
When was that released? I can't remember. But it's like a B-sides rarity album, whatever. But they have an acoustic version of "Be Quiet and Drive," which and like that. If you've never heard the version of that song, it's like absolutely incredible. But I was like, oh wow, this is kind of what Vane did. Cool. And then it kind of got me a little inspired to revisit Be My Blues. And so I was kind of sitting at home, kind of started playing around with like a different structure, different this, different that. So went to Marshall. I was like, hey, dude, like we should I'd love to like work on this with you and just like jam it out. So we did. And lo and behold, again, the song sat in my inbox for 2 years, just was there, never did anything. And then as I finally kind of started to like conceive the idea of what Pyrophonics was going to be was, I really have this love and admiration for like the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s music, which I think is very underrated. Yes. And as I started writing the album and really kind of coming up, I think, with the universe and like how this whole world is going to be, I started thinking, I was like, Be My Blues could really fit on this album. And it was funny because after I made that decision, going into pre-production with Zach, who's, it's so funny, man. It's like, I can be so arrogant sometimes and be so set in my way. And this song is the truest example of that, because the structure of what you hear now was so different in the demo. Right. And he was just like, hear me out. And I know when he says that, like he can sense he knows like my anxiety is kind of going up a little bit. I'm like, oh, fuck. But he's like, hear me out. What if we tried XYZ for the song? And I'm like, there's no way. You can't do that. That doesn't make sense. You can't move this here. You can't move that. No, he's like, just let me try it. So he just kind of started messing around with like just the demo version of it. I was just like, holy shit, I think we just made this really special moment on the record. And then from there, I finally kind of understood what he was seeing. And then we just kind of went after it really, really hard. And we created this very cool, moody, borderline trip hop, Deftones-y song. I don't know, but it was so funny because in the demo version, it was essentially just trying to be a Deftones song. But then now that you have the album version, it's this very unique sounding moment of the album, and I think a unique song. And super, super happy with kind of how it turned out, because those are kind of those beautiful moments, I think, in music where you really don't expect something going a certain way and it ends up going there, and you give yourself a much better result. But yeah, so as far as how the song was conceived, that was the way. But I think lyrically, it's like I kind of want to just like talk about those relationships that are so unhealthy to the point where the only attention you're getting is the negative attention. So your mind starts to play tricks on you where that's what you need and that's what you want, that's what you're craving, and it somewhat becomes a little fetishized and becomes a dark, twisted world where the only real way you two are kind of, for lack of a better term, getting off is just like, she's fucking me over and like my suffering of getting fucked over is getting her addicted to me, and she wants no one else. It's just this weird stick cycle, and basically it basically just kind of talks about the very, very unhealthy relationships which I have been in my life. So yeah, it's, well, I think when I talk about it, I'm like, damn, that's a pretty dark idea. But yet again, it does create something that's cinematic, and I think will leave people kind of thinking like, oh, whoa, okay, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, and relatable as well. And obviously, people will maybe they can use it as a reference point to find their own catharsis, as you have done through some of
For
those
sure,
some of those
absolutely.
songs, which is, I think, is a
Yeah.
beautiful idea. Okay, man, I think it's time. I could talk to you for hours about bands and stuff like this.
Yeah, dude, same.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But I've got a couple of promo questions left, and one, I appreciate. You might not be coming over here for a tour anytime soon. I realize touring is more of a challenge these days than it's ever been. But what is your message to fans of yours in the UK who have gotten behind Heavenward, and also your back catalogue as well? Everything that you've done, really. What is your message to your fans over here in the UK that have supported you from the beginning of your career and will continue to do so as you move forward with Heavenward?
It's the greatest musical honor. I should say it's the greatest honor I've had in my musical life, truly. I grew up being obsessed with British bands. Oasis, discovering Oasis when What's
Yeah.
the Story came out was just like a life-changing moment for me. And then forever since then, it was just mainly English bands and bands from the UK that have really changed my life and have stuck with me. And then going over to, I played the UK numerous times. Teenage Risk did Reading and Leeds.
Yeah.
I've done Reading and Leeds prior with other bands that did Tea in the Park, Oxygen. It's different, man. It's like you'll never know being a band from America and then going to the UK, or the other way around, I should say. But like being in a band in America and going to the UK is just different in the best way possible. So it's always my dream to have attention in the UK. It just because like I just think it's the coolest fucking thing in the world, and I respect the music world in the UK so much and always have. So man, if there's ever an opportunity for me to come out there and play again, I would take it in a heartbeat because it would be fucking amazing. But yeah, I mean, I'm just grateful for it all. It's pretty incredible that music could even reach people that far away.
Absolutely, man. It's a testament to the quality that it has connected with so many people. And again, I'm
Cheers,
very
man.
very excited to sort of see what people think of this new record. This is the last question, Cam, where it's basically checking whether I've done my job properly. Really, is there anything that I have missed today that you would like to plug or promote? Anything you've got going on that you want to share before we finish up?
To be honest, no, because you were great, man. It's like, I'll do interviews sometime where it's just kind of so carbon copy, and like not to diss anyone for
Of
doing it.
course.
Everyone has their own process, so that's fine. But there are interviews where it's like, oh, okay, this is working the way I think I need it to work and I want it to work. And this was one of them, man. I appreciate the in-depth questions. I appreciate the actual interest and the understanding of like what this is, and it goes a million miles, man. Like you don't realize that. So there's importance in what you do, and I'm just grateful that you care enough to want to talk to me about what I made. To me, that's still very odd and strange, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you, man.
Oh man, no worries. It's honestly, it's been a pleasure, and I was a fan. I will admit, I've been a fan of the output for a long time, but it's lovely to be able to connect, on this level where
Oh yeah.
where you can reflect, so honestly and openly, and that is something that I don't always get the chance to do with people. So thank you so much for your for being so open and reflective with me today. I really appreciate your time, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure, dude. Yeah, you're a legend, man. Thank you so much.